All right. Well,
Hey.
here we go. We're ready.
We made it. We did. We survived the weekend. We're back. We are got espresso running through our veins this morning. So sit back, relax. It is March 10th, the year 2026. And welcome everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 911.
Are you going European on me now with the espresso? Freshly.
Yeah, I'm gonna start doing the countdown in in the metric system.
Slow
and start talking.
drip.
I'll slowly start referring everything into kilograms and the metric system. And next thing you know, I'll pull up. I'll be driving my car with the steering wheel on the other side.
Yeah.
Can we? I don't know what we were watching the day, but Hayden was like, "Why do they drive over there?" Oh, we were watching the Ironman New Zealand coverage on Friday night, as much as he was like, "Can you please change the channel?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm not watching another episode of Basquatch. So you can go downstairs, you can suffer through this with me." And yeah, he was like, "Why are they on the opposite side of the road?" And I was like, "Well, actually, I was like, over there, that's the right side for them. I mean, it's the left, but it's their right. They're correct." He was like, "Well, that's weird." I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I think they were kind of rocking at first. I think we decided to go with miles and pounds and drive on another side and put the steering wheel on a different side." Yeah, but yeah, it's I'm slowly merging to meters and in the metric system, and I'll just be referring to things in kilograms. And kilometers per hour. So I'll stop saying 8-minute pace. I'll say something around 5:02 kilometer pace. I don't even know what that translation, because it is super aggravating. I know it's super lazy and a small world problem, but whenever I'm tracking athletes on that are doing a race that's international and it's in kilometers, I'm like, this tells me nothing.
It's hard, man.
It is. They're right now they're doing 40 kilometers, and I'm like, that sounds good, but is it good? So you don't really know. And the same thing with the case. So yeah, I just have to do backward splits to try to figure itself out. But yeah, no, it's I'm not veering that far up. But I do like a solid espresso. I'm not a big coffee latte guy or mocha, whatever people do with that. I like just straight coffee, but I do like a solid espresso every once in a while.
That's nice. I whenever I watch these races, I just think I'm just so bummed about that, because we actually were taught the metric system when I was a kid, and it was like a week-long crash course kind of thing, and it was I didn't pay attention, but I understand, so don't come at me, because I understand it's probably better. It's simpler, because it's all based on 10.
Right.
And but yeah, I mean, it was just I remember kind of sort of learning about it, but now I have no clue. And it really it distorts my brain watching. It makes it harder to watch. But, I watched some of that too. And it was just by accident, because it was on Friday. And I opened up YouTube, and it was just right there. It is.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh,
your search history,
I'll
dude.
watch that.
You freaking watching.
And I started watching, and it was at the end of the bike, I think, or towards the end of the bike, and I was just so confused by why pros were passing age groupers.
Oh, yeah.
And then I figured it out that they had a 70.3 that started beforehand, and I was just like, this is just weirding me out, because they were starting to run, and they were passing age groupers, and it was just all discombobulated in my head. And then the metric system, the whole thing was...
I know, right?
And then it wasn't that great a race, really, but...
No, it was. I mean, it was interesting to watch. You probably didn't catch it because if you got the end of the bike ride, but it was interesting watching Christian Blumenfeld completely lost his right arrow extension. So they come up from a camera angle, and he's holding on to it with his right hand, it's flimsing. It's just it's completely come detached from his arrow pad.
Well, I've been there. I get it.
I was like, dude, I mean, like I said, I was there. I mean, we even referenced this in the New Orleans 70.3 mention a couple weeks ago. And I feel like it happens every race. We're going to get into our topic in a minute, but it is interesting. I think every single pro race I've watched in the last 6-8 months, at least some pro has some cockpit problem.
Really?
Because they're doing all these high tech add-ons, or sometimes doing 3D printed risers or even extensions with like arm cups, and like they're just so brittle that you hit like, and that was I think one of the commentators mentioned like some of those roads in New Zealand were just a little bit rough, and you hit a pretty good divot, and you can think of the force of your body weight like leaning forward coming down on that like pad or that extension, it's just gonna shatter, because they want things as light as possible, and they want things sometimes like just as completely like, it's like they don't care if they break them. But yeah, I mean all these races, I mean even the guy that ended up winning Surefire from America, he was saying, he was like, dude, I had to give kudos to him because he finally just ditched it because he was able to shift through gears on this base bar. And he was like, I got to get him credit for riding like almost the entire, like it had to been close to 100 miles or 160K, as they would say, through of the course with like leaning to his left on his pad. And to having his hand, he's like, I've had extensions break. You saw it in Kona, you saw it in Nice. Yeah, I don't know if it feels slightly unsafe. I mean, for some, like if you think about like the speeds that sometimes they're going, and like you're just like not putting like a really sturdy front end on. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I thought it ended up being a fairly, I don't say boring race because I thought the run was interesting with Matt Hansen coming up from behind and I think it was Pierre Lacour coming up that kind of chasing down to Raffoli. Blumenfeld never featured, but yeah, the women's race was a snoozer. Kat Matthews just dominated from end to end, but yeah, no, it was a interesting racing weekend, but yeah, you got Dallas 70.3 this weekend, then you got Oceanside, Ironman Texas. And God, and then you're looking into May with Chattanooga and a bunch of others. So yeah, like that was like the official, I think, kickoff, and it was actually a pretty decent. I saw pro field coming to Dallas 70.3 this weekend, which should be an interesting race. I know it's sold out, and an interesting stat that I heard from Nick the Brick was that I think he said 70 to 80% are first timers
at Dallas.
First time. Yes, which I was shocked. I mean, Texas is a pretty large, yes, state, but like a pretty large triathlon community. I mean, you've had Ironman Texas there for what, 10, 12 plus years. You got Austin, that's not far by. Dallas, you have Texas 70 point. These are two early season races, right? They've both been in April for the last 8 or 9, 10 years. So it's not like this is like a new month with a new race. They have Waco to end the year. So like, it's not like this is like an Omaha, right? Or a Rockford, right? That you're getting a brand new 70.3 with not a lot going on around it. Yeah, I was actually like really stunned. I would have thought it was very little first timers, but yeah, I think they said on the race participant list there was like 70 to 80% were complete first timers to the 70.3 distance.
Now,
which
have we fact
very
this?
Interesting to me.
Have we fact checked that? Because
it's a
like, how do you know that? First of all,
so when you sign up, they ask you. I think it's like about I think they ask you what it is. So yeah, I thought that was just like an enormous number, which you could say that's it's really good for the sport, right? That many new people are getting into it. Obviously, like you don't want to ever see that on an Ironman start list, but that's just a lot of people doing their first one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, especially early in the season. But I guess, and I would imagine of the 2,500 people that are supposed to be doing it, I would probably say 2,000 of them are in state. I would have to guess it's like because it's just, again, it's huge state, but just a huge triathlon community. So yeah, it's a first year race. I'll be down there. We got a lot of people racing. But yeah, I can see if it's put on well, I can see it being a pretty solid like early season, race. Again, first year races, people are a little bit skittish to do. They don't know how it's going to turn out, what the course is going to be like. Again, who knows what the weather's going to be like? Everybody thought Rockford was going to be, pretty calm and cool weather, cooler weather, right? Compared to what they had last year. It was windy and like freaking racing in August. So yeah, I think people are a little bit, hesitant to do like first year races, let them work out the kinks a little bit. But yeah, that's this weekend. It's got a pretty solidly like booked pro field. And a lot of first timers. So yeah, I think that's good for the sport overall to see that many people kind of influxing in. And and at least starting with the 70.3 before they make their way up to the full.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to say 60% first timers.
You're going to say,
because don't you think we have a tendency to exaggerate, not just us, but like the world today? It's just like, it's just exaggerate everything.
100%. I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But yeah, first year, early season race. Actually it's, early season racing isn't the topic for today, but like you got Dallas this weekend, you got a couple bigger races coming up, 70.3s and fulls. You got obviously just at Ironman New Zealand. We know that the majority of our listeners are based here in North America, but the season's long or the season's about to start, right? So a lot of athletes, you've been training, we're going to assume, right, since January. We'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt from November to December, but early part of the year, we get questions a lot from our own athletes and other people like email and messaging in. What should I be focusing on this year? I've got an event placed here, and here. What should I be doing right now? What if I don't have an event on the calendar, right? What if I'm not sure about what I'm going to do this year, what I'm having time for? And I'm actually finding, like, I don't know about you, but like as like the last 2 or 3 years, I've had more and more athletes be unsure of their entire race calendar through probably April or May than ever. Most of the time, like I know like 2022, 2023, it was like, I sent out the race form email and you get like 95% responses with like their full year planned out. And I think this year I've had the least amount of people like, listen, my life is just super busy right now. I don't know what I can fit in. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go long again. I don't know if I want to keep going short, with races not completely selling out all the time, especially full, right? 7.3s are selling out still pretty quickly. I'm not really sure what I want to do. And so the question, like, what should I be doing right now? What should my focus should be? Obviously, that's going to be very, very different if you've got, if you're doing an early season race, like we'll call it like mid-May to now. So like next 2 months, right? If you're in that like next 2 months phase, right, you've got a 70.3 or full, you should obviously be entering into or either midway or ending like your build phase, right? If you're doing like Ironman Texas pretty close, you're pretty close to doing like some race specific work. But obviously the closer you get to a race, I think people have the least amount of questions, which I think is interesting, right? Like you would think the closer people get to a race, the more questions. Now they still have a lot of questions, right? Where they're triathletes, they've got a lot of questions, but they seem more like sure of what they should be doing, right? From a distance standpoint, from a demand and energy standpoint, at that point, it's all about, you've kind of got your speed. It's about pacing. It's about nutrition. You're not going to get, in my experience, like those last 4 to 6 weeks, you're not going to be gaining an enormous amount of fitness. You're just going to be making sure you're pacing things correctly, making sure your numbers are correct, getting the distance in, keeping that volume high, and just making sure you're kind of topping things off with, from a durability and strength standpoint. 70.3, you're probably adding a little bit more intensity, doing some 70.3 work on, in most people, I think 70.3 wise, when you get closer to race day, you're adding in some tempo work because that's pretty close to half marathon run speed. You're doing some 70.3 work on the bike in terms of watts from 78% maybe to 85%, depending on how high your ceiling is and how long you can hold your threshold. And obviously swim, you want to be doing some, a little bit harder intervals, right? I think one of the things people should probably do more of like throughout the course of the year before we kind of get into specifics is always including some hard sets for the swim. And I know like, oh, here you guys again talking about swimming. But I think regardless of the distance, sprint Olympic, 70.3 or full, whether you intend to or not, you're going to go out hard or fast. You're going to have to pick up the pace at some point. And I think it's just important to always include at least once a week, right, some hard swimming, right, to get that feeling that you have. Even if you're like, oh, I'm going to take this one easy, even if you're taking it easy, you're going to have like this really elevated heart rate, right? You're nervous about the race. It's the beginning of it. You're either running in the water, you're wading in the water, you had your wetsuit on for 10 minutes, you're kind of anxious about the swim, maybe because you're just anxious about starting the race, or you're just anxious because you're not sure about your swim. So even, regardless of the effort and the speed, your arm turnover or your intended pace, you're going to feel, I'm not going to say hypoxic, right? Hopefully you don't feel hypoxic at all, but you're going to feel a little bit winded and out of breath, right? More like you would be doing, especially kind of like we talked about last week with like your heart rate. If you're coming from like a stressful conversation or a stressful meeting or like a whole stressful week, like you're going to go into a session with a raised heart rate. Things are going to feel harder, right? Same thing, heading into the swim. So I always think kind of year round almost like you should be adding in some harder efforts in the swim, which I think people avoid. So again, the 70.3 and like the Ironman race specific stuff, I think that's the easy part. But for a lot of you, like you're not racing until June, July, August. Some people's biggest race is in September. And so the question is like, what should I be focusing on right now? What should I be, dialing into? And we talked about this, I think in, December, January, but the first part of the year, again, for most people, regardless of experience, regardless of, what you consider your level of ability, right? If you're a pointy in on the age group or if you're back of the packer, in my opinion, like a lot of people should just be focusing, not strictly, but you should be spending a large amount of your time focusing on efficiency and economy. And that means like, incorporating some run drills, incorporating some strength, do a lot of cadence work, like on the bike. Like, to me, like, especially now that, hey, it's sunny out, right? So we're in March, but people can ride outside, but cadence is a great way to produce stimulus without, adding in intensity, right? It's still a different stimulus because you're still kind of going low and high in the cadence. Same thing with run drills. You're adding in a little bit of stimulus. It's all about how efficiently can I move, right? And that also incorporates some strength training. Like you should have been doing some strength training January, February. We're still in March, still be doing it, right? You should still be building that foundation to be a more durable athlete, right? And preparing yourself, like, a phrase we've used for the last 4, 5, 6 years is, train so you can train like you need to train for when you're ready to train. And that first part, and even like the second part of like that train phase is people call it like general prep, right? They call it general prep because you're just generally preparing your body to get ready to train, right? To absorb the training. Like that's a lot of aerobic work, a lot of efficiency, like, because again, I know we spent January and February talking about it, but if you skip that step, which a lot of people do, because a lot of people don't do shit in January, February, and March. Like, they get, April and May, we always get an enormous amount of influxes of athlete inquiries because people either have thought they could do things on their own and have no idea what they're doing, right? And so they feel like they're behind or they're just unsure, right? The closer your race day, the more unsure you get, or they just didn't do anything at all. And they're like, I think I'm way behind. So it's either I'm way behind or I'm way off course. And so if you skip that phase, like I still think it's always very important to plug. Again, the length of it might not be that long, but still plugging in like, let's make sure we're doing some efficiency. Like, let's make sure we're running well. Let's make sure we're cycling. Let's get rid of our dead spots. Let's have a smooth, pedal stroke, especially with swimming. Like, I know you want to head to the pool. I know you want to do 2K straight so you can just get out of the pool and spend as little time as possible, right? And I've done the math for you in multiple podcasts. Like, you're better off doing 2100s on, 15 seconds rest. You're going to gain 5 minutes. That's it. That's like 2 red lights, right? So it's like you're saving an enormous amount of time. Of those 5 minutes, you're probably going to spend 65 minutes on Facebook throughout the course of the day. So let's not use like, I want to get out and get my day going as an excuse, like spend some time working on form because what tends to happen, right? When you skip that, what I would consider like that efficiency and economy phase, and that also includes like some VO2 work, some hard work, short sprints and running, some hit intervals, like some 30-30s in cycling and some arm turnover, distance per stroke type things in swimming, is if you skip it on that phase and you don't become the most efficient version of yourself possible, not from just a technique standpoint, but also, aerobically, right? You want to raise your floor and raise your ceiling as much as you can before you start to fill it in, right? With some threshold or tempo work, is the harder you start to work, the less return on your investment you get, right? So let's say you don't work on your form in the pool. You don't try to get better. I'm so tired of doing drills, right? I just want to swim. Well, the more intensity you start to add into your swimming and the more volume you start to add into your swimming, whichever comes first, it's really hard to implement both, right? Because they're both stressors. You can't really double down on intensity and stress. You're going to continue to get a larger negative return on your investment, your energy, the longer and the harder you go throughout the season. Right, it's kind of the opposite effect of the wetsuit. Right, the worse swimmer you are, the more benefit you get because you're in the water longer and your body position is worse. Front pack swimmers, in a 70.3, they might gain I don't know, 50 to 90 seconds, maybe. You know, Ironman for like, a sub-hour swim, you might gain 2 minutes. Yes, you got some energy costs, but then if you're like a 115, 120 swimmer, you might be saving like, 3 to 4, maybe 5 minutes sometimes because you're that inefficient, right? But then you take away that wetsuit and you're going to be in the water for 30, 35 minutes longer, and it's taking you a lot more effort. Your pace might be 150, but the effort you're putting out is like 130. You're just not getting that return. Same thing for the cycling, right? Like if you got dead spots in your stroke, you can't work up and down, the cadence ladder. You're not working with, your maximum, neuromuscular efficiency. You haven't raised your ceiling. Same thing with running. If you got poor running economy and you haven't done strength, like the effort it's going to take for you to go out and run, we see it all the time, at the marathon or watching people swim in the Olympics, is they look so effortless. Like they just look like they're making it so easy. You're watching like Annie Hogg or, Rennie like run, the marathon at Kona or Patrick Lang, and you're like, are they even trying? Because they just look so freaking efficient, right? So they spent time being efficient because the better return on your investment long term, maybe not immediate, right? But long term is efficiency. Coach, I just want to run fast, right? And I'm like, well, if you can't run fast and well for 200 meters, you definitely can't do it for 2 miles, and you sure as hell can't do it for 20. It's like you should have been, or you still should be focusing on that efficiency, that economy, making sure that I'm, moving correctly while getting in some good aerobic work and some high intensity work, because that's what's going to set yourself up for, a great middle to latter part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said there is so accurate. I think a lot of us get into this sport to sort of change our lives, at one point, or just kind of shift the way things are going. And we kind of get into it, and then we kind of change things, and then we sort of like get lazy with it or whatever. And all that stuff you're talking about, like the efficiency and economy, and that stuff takes a long time. It's so crazy to me. I watched I don't know if you've seen it. There's a documentary about Mike Tyson and on YouTube. Actually, it was a free thing I watched the other night, and it was interesting because he was a troublemaker when he was a kid, and then he went up to the Catskills to be with Cus D'Amato when he was like 13 years old or something like that to get him out of there. And the one thing that like he got, for some reason, this Cus D'Amato really connected with Tyson, and he got him disciplined. And they were talking about how he would work on, like, I don't know, dodging a punch like all day, like just to make it perfect. And I think about that in terms of, do we really work on that stuff, in this sport? And especially at this time of year, it's like we get in to change our lives and we want to do better, and then we kind of do it, and then we forget that this sort of has to keep going for a long time, and then that's how we end up getting better. But like with a guy like me or many people that I coach or have coached, it's sort of like they just turn it off for a few months or whatever. And like you're saying, at this time of year, especially if you're, looking at something later, there's plenty of time, but, you got to do something now. So for me, it's like, that if it's at 2,000, going to the pool and just getting it done like you're talking about, well, you can mix in that stuff, right? It's like, I don't think it has to be completely one or the other, but I do think it's something important that we actually get going and build some kind of consistency. So sometimes, people don't like high cadence, and I'm like, all right, well, do some big gear stuff and do what you like, but then mix it in once in a while. It's like we have to prime our pump a little bit for these kind of things. And I think it's so interesting to get how do we get engaged and, sort of excited about economy and efficiency, because you're right. It's like people are kind of trying to get back at it and be consistent right now, and they have been for a couple months. And then that, every couple of weeks they're just, I got to go see if I still got it kind of thing. And they just go out and shred themselves, and they're like, okay, I still got my speed. It's in there. And then, but then it kind of sets you back, and it's just sort of this back and forth thing. And I do think that for me, it's like, I've really just been working on trying to be consistent with stuff, and I just sometimes think that we can overthink that process too. It's like, I want to get better, but like, I haven't earned the right to really get better until I'm consistent. And I know that sounds kind of like harsh or something, but I think about that because like until I, that's why I tried to start last fall, and I did, and I stayed pretty consistent through now. And I have like this, it's starting to really kind of come together a little bit, and I think that is something we got to really think about as triathletes, is like, it's kind of never done. And what that means at different times of the year is that you got to figure out what works and what's not working, but you're always got to, I think it's important to keep that efficiency and economy thing always in your brain. It's like, it doesn't have to be 1,000 repetitions of something all the time, but if it's just something that you're really working in there. But I also think it's important to be patient with it, how many times have we seen, I can't do high cadence, I'm not into it. And then it takes like 4 years before people are like, the light bulb went off or whatever. But it's a good time of year to really just kind of start building your momentum and figuring out ways, what's working for you now. Because I don't really care. Like, sometimes athletes will be like, I felt like doing this or whatever. I'm like, that's good. You did something. Now let's build that routine and keep it going. Because when you're talking about high cadence, and I love that shit, man. But I always like to mix it up with other stuff too. And it's, I don't know. I think we got to find our way, but we have to commit to it. You know what I mean?
And that, I mean, you just said it, like, that is one of the biggest issues I see with athletes is they don't take the time, to have like a really true long, like aerobic, yes, you should still add intensity, right? But like in a long, like aerobic efficiency or economy, whatever phase you want to call it, they don't want to take that long to develop it. Or they have an early season race, and so they want to do like 3. But here's the thing, right? It's like early season races shouldn't derail you from your year-long objective.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
And I see it all the time with like requests about like, hey, because I mean, I think it's just a good reminder. Like, listen, like economy is basically just how much oxygen or energy you have to use at a given pace, power, or speed. That's it. So the more economical you are, the less energy you need, right, to produce that same pace in the pool, power on the bike, or speed on the run, which means better endurance performance. Right. And I get it. Like, unless you have access to a lab, like, it's really, really challenging to measure. Right. So if an athlete's like, yeah, like I'm swimming easier right now at this pace, or I'm, able to, run this route at a lower heart rate, like, as a coach, again, like without access to a lab and like a metabolic mass, you can't be like, hey, well, I know it's because of the speed training we've done, or is it because you're now just a more efficient runner, right? Your stride's better, your foot strike is better, your form is better, right? Same thing with cycling. You're spinning at a much more efficient. You're using the full 360 degrees. And then also in swimming, right? You had a breakthrough, you had an aha moment. Now I'm doing 125s when it used to be 140s. Like, this is all efficiency. And I think, like, going back to the point about, being consistent with it is, and what you should be doing right now is, if you've got a long-term view of like what you want to be better at this year, right? You want to be a better endurance athlete. Like, I want to be able to go longer and be more efficient. And you're doing a race in September, October, November, right? And you've got, I'll just use, a 70.3 in the next 4 weeks as an example. I would not have a traditional like base build in like race specific phase. Let's just say, like, for argument's sake and simplicity, that those phases are 12-8-4, right? 12 weeks of like a base, which we're talking about now is like, economy, efficiency, and then you're going to do 8 weeks of kind of a build phase. Now we're at 20 weeks. Now we're doing like 4 weeks, like a 3-week race specific phase and a 1 week taper. And now we're at 24. Well, and that's like a C-B race. and you know you really have stuff to work on, then I would probably elongate that to a 16-week base kind of economy period, and then only do like a 4-week build and a 4-week race, or maybe even like just a 6-week and then like a 2-week, right? Like, because if the name of the game, right, is to get better, then don't sacrifice an upcoming race that is of little to no importance to you, to cut a cycle short that you know you should work on to become a better overall athlete. And I see it all the time, especially when people get wrapped up in early season 70.3 work or like, Olympics, is as soon as they're done with it, they want to go right back to 70.3 work. And I'm like, no, we could have, because they always think the race specific intensity is always the answer or the problem. And a lot of times, like, no, like you just rushed into high intensity, and our cake is very, very, we're working with like a 2-layer cake here. Like that's why we ended up kind of collapsing at the end, or you had a bad race. Like, we just don't have a large enough cake. Let's maybe strip the icing off and build 2 or 3 more layers, then put some icing back on, right? Let's build a bigger cake, right? Have a higher ceiling and have a higher floor, like in terms of, your zone 1, zone 2 kind of aerobic capacity, and then your anaerobic capacity. And then as you get closer to race day, let's fill in those layers. Let's add on some icing. They want to cut it short all the time and do so much, race specific work, or, go too long and too far too often, and then they just get stale, right? Like, listen, there's only 2, especially for age groupers, I think you're only able to really peak like 2, max 3 times in the year. And that means like you're going to have to detrain a little bit. You're going to have to go back to some of the basics, but it's really hard for athletes to accept that. And the sad part is that the majority of those athletes also didn't spend really any adequate time building that efficiency and aerobic capacity to start the year. Because if you're going to have trouble being consistent with it and embracing the plan and the process during the season, you probably had a hard time doing it to start. So you're just continuing to like race pace your way through the year in that like gray zone, and doing it year after year after year, and wondering why you never get better. And I think it's a huge problem I see all the time with newer athletes or athletes who are inconsistent in January, February, March, is like, accept what your limiters are. And if you have an area to focus on it, then make that 100% of your focus. Because again, like going back to the efficiency and economy piece, like if you've got a gap in your training, and you've got a race or 2 coming up that aren't, high priority, it's a lot of times like don't even do a race like specific block. Just train the way just keep training the way you're supposed to train, taper for 4 to 6 days, and go rip it. I mean, like that's it. Like that's your intensity, of the week. I see it all the time. Like, hey, I've got a race coming up. I need to do some race specific work. I'm like, well, like, no, we need to keep building what we're doing. Like, this race is just to see what kind of progress you made by doing the basics right. Because we still need to work on a lot of these basics. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to keep growing that gap between, an efficiency and an efficiency. And the larger that gap becomes in your deficient areas and your efficient areas, the more problematic it is, especially as you go to longer distances. And so you have to, continue to embrace these periods, again, like, especially if your race is already, but even again, like if your race is fairly close this weekend, next weekend, in 3 or 4 weeks, and it's not your biggest A race here and the only one you're doing, like, then your specific work isn't going to be as lengthy, right? One, because you have more work to, but 2, you don't have like this giant, again, like I think people get so wrapped up and obsessed with like race specific work or peak phase, but like I generally feel the same way about peak phase as I do taper. Like the length of your peak phase and the length of your taper is what you've earned. And if you've been pretty inconsistent, like you don't need a long peak phase. Like you still got nothing to peak, right? You're still building the sword. Like we're not trying to sharpen a dagger here. We're trying to sharpen like a samurai sword. Like, so let's keep building the sword to the very, very end. And then, you can choose what you want to go to battle with. But in the same thing with a taper, like, just because it's an Ironman or a similar thing doesn't mean you need like a 2-week or a super long taper. I mean, for Dallas this weekend, I think I'm going to do like a 3 or 4 day taper just because I haven't done like a tremendous amount of volume in the last like 6 months. I just, want to keep doing what I'm doing and stay sharp and, go at it. So same thing with like a peak phase. Like people get so wrapped up in these like race specific blocks and what's in like, the longer you train, the longer that block can be. Right, you put in a ton of work. You nailed your base building, your base and your build phases, and you did them for a long period of time. You put consistent at the other. Then that race by block might be a little bit longer because you've trained, so you train like you need to train, and now we can train to get ready for the race. You might have a longer runway, and then you'll probably need a little bit longer taper. But the more inconsistent you are, the more steps you try to skip. Like there is no, race specific. And I'm also not a huge fan of just ditching. You see this a lot too, like in pre-populated or training plans, is like they just stop doing all of their intensity. It's just race specific intensity. That's it. I love being able to add in like a little bit of everything to make sure, again, like just like you talked about with cadence, like feeling primed, like with the high cadence and the low cadence is, you got to still work those systems that you got to where you want it, or you're going to start, let's say you built your VO2 up to where you want to, you just don't need to just stop doing it completely because it'll lessen a little bit. You want to keep it where it is. Just do just enough to keep it and then keep staying sharp. But yeah, I can't echo your sentiment enough about just being consistent with it and watching those weeks stack instead of trying to take shortcuts and jump phases or jump mileage or jump, time duration on these longer things. I'm like, if you're not, the same thing we talk about with long rides and runs, like, these insane increases you see people do from like 14 to 16. I'm like, dear God, like that's in a long time to like in a 3-week block, you're going from 14 to 18 miles. That might be 45, 50 minutes for some people. Like it's just an enormous amount of time to jump. And I think there's a lot of things wrong, I think, with the way a lot of people train, or at least we've been taught that we have to train, right? For especially for Ironman, right? And I think a lot of it, like, first timers are very insecure and very unsure of themselves. So they, like to do a ton, right? They like to be really, really busy. Like I ran a guy yesterday at the gym. He was like, hey, I've thought about you this weekend. I went to go ref like this soccer game. I got in like 20,000 steps, and there's this like 25-year-old guy he's doing his first Ironman. And like he said he ran 10 miles before that. And then he brought his trainer and like did a trainer ride in between games. Then he went to the pool after another one. And I was like, yeah, he's probably not going to do well. Like he thinks he's committed, right? He thinks he's motivated and doing like all the extra work. But I was like, dude, 20,000 steps, that's like a Disney day. Plus all that work, that's like, I don't know what race you're doing. That's panic training no matter what you're doing. It's just that fear that we're not doing enough and that we have to add more to be better, right? Instead of just training with efficiency and purpose, and again, not just piling on extra intensity. I think like the extra added intensity people like to add in all the time, that's always like, well, I probably have, but rarely ever heard an athlete been like, hey, man, I'm loving this aerobic work. Can we just add more of this? Like, I feel like I'm really fit. Like, I know it's going to happen overnight, but I feel great. My energy's high. I'm sleeping good. Stress is, is low to minimal. Like, let's just add some more zone 1, zone 2. No. You give them like a hard ride and then like, bring it on, baby. Give me more of these this week. And you're like, but dude, we can't do that. Like, we're going to smash you. But for whatever reason, like that is what, we crave these and we sign up for these long events, but we don't want to do the long, boring work required to do them well. Right? It's like, it's kind of opposite, right? It's like it'd be like a sprint Olympic athlete being like, man, really craving these 5-hour rides, man. Just bring them. And you're like, yeah, that might be okay, but like we don't need to do those, right? But in Ironman, same with this, like, oh, give me hard all the time. It's like, are we sure we're signing up for the same thing right here?
Yeah. I mean, in general, right, we've talked about how we'd rather have a little bit of an undertrained athlete than an overtrained athlete for racing. And I think that this is kind of at the core of the whole thing. And you talking about like long term and thinking about like becoming your best athlete overall. And I I think back to my first Ironman. I don't really think I was overtrained, but like comparatively to what I've been used to my whole life, I was certainly like feeling it. You know what I mean? It was a lot of work that I wasn't used to and shit. And you go through your first race, and I do think that there's something about, you know, our mental bandwidth, right? Like you can, like I did it and I fought and I did well, and it was something that, you know, I just put all of my, I was not going to quit kind of energy towards. And then you go into the next thing, you're not quite trained up as much, or you're like, oh, you know, trying to do something special again or whatever. And then, and like, you don't, in other words, I wasn't like just slowly building my whole athletic, you know, profile. I was kind of going high, and then I bring it back down, and then I would like sink in this muck, and then I try to bring, it's kind of like that, oops, I did it again. I was doing that over and over. And I just think that if you're thinking more long-term, right, it's sort of like sticking with a plan and not, because everybody, you know, nobody wants to go in a race and not have it go well, right? So you get kind of that prisoner of the moment thing, and you know, you might, that's why I was so, like, when I started, it was this Olympic, then I do a half, and then I do a full. And I was not really overreaching at all. It was just kind of like right in pattern. And I think that overreach becomes a big challenge for a lot of triathletes because, like you're saying, well, we just got to get into race specific here. But, you know, my whole thing has always been, how do I make this feel easier? You know, and I think that that's one sort of deflection that we always miss, is that, you know, and you've done it, right? Like we have the run program in the fall, you know, the run, is that what it's called? Run program or whatever?
Yeah, run program, yeah.
People run a lot, you know, frequently, you know, not always long, whatever, but they keep frequent. And I was kind of on that, I guess, a little bit, and I've been running. So, but you don't notice shit. It's hard to notice things. And then eventually you'll be like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm running easier, and I'm going about, you know, 15 to 30 seconds a mile faster than I was 3 months ago. You know, it's tricky to kind of keep an eye on sometimes because you want to see that top end and you want to see that speed. But I just think that there's, you know, along with efficiency and economy, this long-term play, it's difficult to like let it sort of happen, you know, rather than force it. And to me, that's one of the biggest challenges about this sport is really kind of building that cake and that foundation, and then just being faster because of that. I've always talked about, it's like I could go out and, you know, whatever, do a Moneghetti run right now, and I could probably get speed wise, you know, for 30 seconds or whatever, close to what I used to think I was, you know, or what I used to do 10 years ago. But that doesn't mean I can hold it. You know what I mean? It's just like, I understand that we want to go fast and have that max speed and do all these things, but there's so much, I guess, magic in that sort of like fly, you know, running along and just being like, whoa, yeah, I'm just getting a little faster here, but I'm not really trying. And it's just that patience, man. It's just so hard to keep an eye on the long term, I think. And I think the best athletes in this sport have just been doing it, and they're not like overreaching all the time, and they're just kind of staying with it and slowly building it. You know, we talk about it's hard to drive by a house and it looks like there's no progress, but there's a lot going on the inside and the wiring, you know, stuff like that's going on. So I just think that that's a real big challenge with a lot of athletes, including me.
Well, I mean, and it's ironic, right? Because like triathletes, like they don't like pressure and they don't like to feel like rushed, yet they do it to themselves all the time. Like the freedom that the long-term view gives you is like you don't have to analyze every workout, every run, every ride. Like, hey, this was like, you know, 1 watt better than last week. It was just like, hey, I know if I'm doing the right things and I do them for the right amount of time, you know, most of the time, I'm going to get significantly better. But, you know, just like I said about the Moneghetti run, like, you know, when you're in really, really good shape, like some 30, 60, 90, you know, second, you know, hard efforts, they're going to feel like being in the garage and just revving the engine a little bit and feeling good, right? The car is clean, it's not overheating. You do that kind of stuff too early, or in most cases you do it too often. It's like you're fucking drag racing, drag racing out in Baja. I mean, you're just like ripping your car and you can't do anything for the next week. But taking that long-term view on getting better, you're still going to see improvements, and they're going to continue to add up, week after week, month after month after month. But it's just like the constant, like the athletes, honestly, like the athletes that I work with that see the least amount of improvement are the ones that look for it daily, because they want to, in a lot of times it's got nothing to do with training, right? It's just that where they are in life, mentally or emotionally, they need a win. They need to feel like this. They'll go too hard, they'll go too often, they'll get too down on themselves, they'll get too high on themselves. It's always a search, right? And listen, like if you're always searching for something, more often times than not, you're not going to find anything, right? There's nothing to be found, right? But when you know that the work is just the work, and you don't have to peel back, every workout like layers of an onion to find something that's wrong with it, because rarely ever is it anything better, right? Like, you're never going to hear from an athlete, hey man, like, yeah, this run was okay, but man, look at that cadence. Like I'm really improving, like not just slogging along, like an elephant. Like I'm running a little bit quicker. Like that actually felt pretty good. I'm making some strides. No, it's like, oh, I think I'm getting slower, coach. Last week I ran 9:30s. This one was 9:34s. Hey, I think we should up the 5K speed work. And I'm like, right now we're not even running 2 hours a week. So like, let's build that up before we can start to add. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can always recognize when a session hasn't gone as well. Nothing wrong with that. But then just let it go. Leave it alone. Just like you can recognize how that same ability, right? When you have a really good workout, had a good one today. Sweet. Moving on. I'm doing the right things. Because here's the thing, you didn't have a great workout. You've had a really good last few weeks of training probably that led to that great workout. Like let that be the look in, but we get so caught up in like wanting to be in a rush, and like this next race has to go incredible, right? Or I'm going to have to reinvent the wheel. I'm like, it's just a stepping stone. And like into the freedom it can give you to approach a race or a training block or whatever distance event you're trying to accomplish. Like, unless I'm planning on retiring and never doing sport ever again at the end of 2026, this is just a stepping stone. But you see so many athletes, again, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, is like 95% of athletes overestimate what they can do in a short period of time and underestimate what they can do over a long period of time. And that is why most people get burnout or annoyed with themselves or frustrated with themselves in training, and either try to do too much and then get discouraged and quit, and then start back over again and get discouraged and quit and start back over again. Like there's like, you got to be consistent and let those things add up slowly and specifically. And then you do that, and like things just, again, it's not about hero workouts, it's not about making everything flashy. It's just about, repeated success each and every day. That's a success, not perfection, right? Not wins, but to me, success is just getting in the work that you're supposed to get in and getting as much of it done as you can. Like not perfection, not all greens, not PRs, not a bunch of medals and training peaks, like just doing the best that you can and being proud of that and being in the moment. Like that stuff just goes such a long way. And as much as triathletes say they hate to feel rushed or have these, unrealistic expectations, they do it to themselves 9 times out of 10 by treating every block between each race as another, retirement send off. Oh, I gotta we gotta do things differently. Like, no, like you're not retiring unless you're Brett Favre, right? You're not retiring 5 times this year. Like just nail it this whole year. And then just think about how great you're going to be at the end of the year. And then all that greatness, you're going to start the next year with all of that too. And just keep stacking it, like the race you're about to do now, think about how the race could be next year if you keep doing exactly what you're doing right now.
Yeah. I don't hear that, man.
It's hard. Exactly. Right. It's hard for people to wrap their brain around, myself included.
Yeah. It's like a team that gels, it's like you get your ass kicked early in the season and then you start coming together, there's a lot to be said for that. You said the moment, and you got to respect the moment too, and I always think about, a lot of people are, why are we running by time and not miles? And it's an interesting thing because like you always say, it's like some people would 6 miles would take an hour and 15 minutes. Other people might take 45 or whatever. And a lot of times I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out on a zone 2 run for an hour today. I can't shorten that hour. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to accept the moment. And I just think that we don't do that a lot. We don't respect that. I was, writing the other day about how when I start to write my 3 pages in the morning, a lot of times I'll be like, I want to get this done. You know what I mean? It's like, I just want it done. And I find that I have that tendency with a lot of things. Instead of appreciating what I'm doing, you know what I mean? I'm not there. I'm already trying to finish. And that happens a lot with workouts too. And I think that just that subtle mental shift is like, all right, I'm going to get down here and I'm going to do something good for myself. And I'm going to give this hour all my investment mentally and physically and just trust what it's doing rather than saying I did it and I'm done and I'm always thinking about being finished. That's just a struggle I've always had, and it's why I'm so obsessed with being in the moment. But I do think that those things are really interesting. It's sort of like we get out, going to go ride, the loop, and I'm just like, let's just get this done. And I'm like, what is that, man? Do I really even like this? Of course I do, but I have to be able to accept it in the moment and just enjoy, the process of it rather than always wanting to be done with everything. I mean, it could be a work project or something. If we spend our whole lives just trying to be done with everything, that's kind of weird. Maybe you don't agree.
Sorry, I had my thing on mute because I had to sneeze.
Oh,
no, that's right. No, maybe it's like this, not the best analogy, but like I explain this to Hayden all the time. Is like, why are these people driving so fast? It's because they're more than likely they're in a hurry to get somewhere they don't even want to be.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, man.
I always see people like they're laying on their horn, they're honking at you when you take like 1 extra second to get somewhere, and you're like, I can tell you right now, there's a 99% chance you're going somewhere you don't want to be. Right? You're late to something, you don't want to be there. You're going to work. You're already mad. Like you are already not in a good space. But we got to get there quick. We got to get there as fast as possible. It's like that's the same way. Like. Again, so many athletes can work, but it's a lot. It can be a lot smoother, right? With and less erratic, right? Your progression, it doesn't have to look like a crazy, EKG from between somebody that's doing meditation and getting and then getting zapped, in the temples. Like, it can be just a nice smooth, path up. Where things make sense, and their stimulus is added, reasonably at a reasonable ramp rate, and you're just doing really, really well with it. I think that is, just again, something that I think most athletes have a hard time swallowing. And I think that is just something that, again, like is always good to remind, athletes about. And hopefully we reminded you of this today.
Yeah, and I just had a quick thought about my example of that writing. And it was weird because I'm trying to get done with something that I'm doing to slow down my mind. You know what I mean? It's like, And I think that can be an appropriate analogy for going out and training. Is just the goal is to kind of slow things down instead of always rushing it. You know, and that doesn't mean we have to be slow, but it has to be, you know, working on what you're working on. And I think that when you can get in that space, the time will go faster. You know, it's kind of a weird paradox or something, because if we're trying to get done all the time, it seems like it's never getting done. But if we're just kind of right there and, you know, thinking about our breath and doing what we're doing, then it just kind of gets done.
Yeah.
Without forcing it.
Yeah. It's amazing how that happens, huh? We're not in a rush and we don't force it.
Yeah. See, this podcast flew by because we're just kind of.
It did, right? It did. And it actually flew on by. Yeah. Because we were a little rusty this morning in our pre-show meeting. But no, hopefully you got some out of that today. Again, like there's a lot of places to be right now, depending on where you are, you know, in your race season and what race is the most important to you. But, you know, ultimately, you always got to ask yourself, like, you know, hey, like I don't need to rush through. I want to become the best athlete that I can be. And sometimes that, you know, what you need to do to be the best athlete you can be, right? Though the gaps you might need to fill, those might not perfectly match up to what your idea is of a perfect race lead up, you know, and so you have to be willing to, you know, in your mind, you know, play the long game, right, to get better. And that's just, it's really difficult, I think, and challenging. And I get it. You know, we live in a world where you get it all pretty much whenever you want it. You know, we want ultimate and immediate satisfaction, or to see the, you know, return on our investment immediately. And that's just, it doesn't work that way. You know, so you gotta make those choices. So make those choices, you know, this week and today and this weekend. If you're racing this weekend, best of luck to everyone. Hopefully you got a lot out today. I'll be doing a single podcast this week. I'll be on the road Thursday, so hopefully this will satisfy your need throughout the rest of the week. As always, we love you guys. We really do appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you need anything from Mike, he is available, Mike at c26triathlon.com. Or if you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right. Yeah. Wherever you go, there you are.
There you are. All right, dude. I'll talk to you later.
All right, dude. Have a good trip, and good luck with everything down there.
Thanks, man.
I know we got a lot of people racing, and
dude, good little crew. Wave and say hi.
Robbie does Dallas.
Robbie does Dallas. Get the fuck out of here. That's like a shirt a really old person gets made. Like when they're going on like a family, like when you go somewhere and you see like 40 people with the same shirt, and they're on like this like big family reunion trip, and it's for like a 75th birthday. That's what the fucking t-shirt says. You know, Fred does Fredericksburg, Virginia, 2028. I will say, like, a proud moment in the kitchen this morning. I was getting Hayden on the door, and I was like, "Hey, man, I gotta walk here. I gotta go upstairs and switch over to laundry." He was like, "Yeah, I'm really trying not to wear my C26 shirt this week." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, "I gotta pack it. I gotta wear it in Dallas." And I was like, as long as it doesn't say Robbie does Dallas, then we're good. If it does, we're staying. It's fucking staying here. It's Dallas.
I don't know where that came from. But.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it was funny, so it's a great way to end it. But yeah, Robbie does Dallas. We'll see you next week. Thanks,
all right,
dude.
Man. See ya.